Awesome. Okay, so I'm Seth Lyman. I direct the Bingham Research Center, which is at USU's campus here in Vernal. I've been here about 14 years. Our research team does a lot of different work, but we focus, or one of our big focuses is air quality in Uinta Basin, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'll say too, the Bingham Research Center, in addition to doing academic research, I guess, like other research institutions, we have a specific mandate to make sure that the work we do is able to be used and helps improve our local community and has impact. And so we often bring stakeholders together to try to understand the issue and solve it. And I think that's kind of what we're doing today. So I'm tickled to be able to lead this panel, and thanks to Travis and Uinta and Duchesne County Commissioners for putting this on, and for all of you for being here. For the sake of time, we decided I'll introduce the speakers, or the panelists, I should say. So I'll go with that. And we have Mike Natchez, who we heard from a little bit ago. Mike is a member of the Ute Tribes Business Committee and the former director of the tribe's air quality department. So he has multi-pronged expertise on this issue. We have Chris Colclasure. He's an air quality and environmental attorney with Beatty and Wozniak. He's based in Denver but licensed in Utah, and he represents oil and gas companies on air quality compliance, enforcement, and ozone issues. Sheila Vance here works for the Utah Division of Air Quality as an environmental scientist. She's been there about 10 years, and she specializes in Uinta Basin ozone and oil and gas regulatory issues. And then online we have with us Jeanette Liang from FourPoint Energy. And Jeanette has worked in various parts of the oil and gas industry, upstream, midstream, and transmission for more than 25 years, primarily in air quality and operations. So we'll have perspective on our current air quality issue from a lot of different angles here. And we thought to start out that I think that a lot of us kind of have some of the lay of the land as far as what air quality issues we deal with here in the Uinta Basin, but maybe to make sure we're on the same page, we'll give a little bit of introduction, and Sheila's agreed to do that. And Sheila, we have a few slides as we kind of discuss, and so if I've got the wrong one, tell me, but I'll try to get us to where we need to be. Okay.
All right. Oh. Okay, this is on. Hi. Thanks for sticking around this afternoon. Hopefully we'll be able to provide some good discussion and information for you all today. So yeah, just like Seth was saying, we've heard about ozone today, and I think we all in this room understand that is the air pollutant of concern here in the Uinta Basin. So just sort of as a reminder and a baseline, there is some ozone in the atmosphere that is good and protects us, but ground level ozone is what we're concerned with. As part of the Clean Air Act, there are some criteria air pollutants that they have chosen to be concerned about because of their health and environmental effects. And ozone is one of those criteria air pollutants that we worry about. Ozone, though, is not directly emitted. It's not an emission per se, but what happens is the emissions of NOx, nitric oxides, and VOCs, volatile organic compounds, are emitted through various means, biogenics, just nature, as well as anthropogenic, which is man-made sources of those emissions of NOx and VOCs. What happens is those emissions with the sun's energy creates a chemical reaction which forms ozone, and that ground level ozone is what we're concerned with from a health perspective. And interesting enough, as you can see in this picture, there's some nice green land and it's sunny. So it is normally a summertime issue that you see in urban areas. So the Uinta Basin is unique in that it is a wintertime issue, and we're a rural area here in the basin. So it wasn't anticipated to be an issue in a wintertime rural area until the kind of mid-2000s, late 2000s. It was sort of accidentally found here, and then the Green River, the upper Green River in Wyoming are the two places that see this. So again, EPA has established health standards. So the standard for ozone is based upon impacts to human health and the environment. So I think the next slide, Seth. I'll just kind of keep going.
Yeah, great.
So the other thing we want to just get a baseline for is what is the regulatory status here in the Uinta Basin? So as has been talked about, we are a non-attainment area for ozone. We were designated in 2018 as a marginal non-attainment area. So that's basically the least level. I don't know, there's marginal, moderate, serious. So we're at the least level of classification for an ozone non-attainment area. The Clean Air Act then requires a marginal non-attainment area to take 3 years and get yourself back into attainment. So we had a deadline of 2021 to get ourselves back under the standard for ozone. There's another part of the Clean Air Act that if you have clean data for a certain amount of time, you can ask for an extension on that deadline, which we did. We did that in 21. And you can also ask for a second extension. So the idea being, if you're kind of marginally above the standard, the Clean Air Act is allowing you a little flexibility in time to get yourself back under the standard, and they'll give you that time. Where we landed was we asked for a second one-year extension, as well as the tribe also asked. Together, we asked for this extension. And EPA took some time making that determination, but what happened in December of 2024 is they denied that second extension request, and without that second extension, we didn't attain the standard by the attainment date, and they bumped us up to a moderate classification. Right away, ourselves, the state of Utah, as well as the tribe and other entities, one requested EPA to reconsider that. That's a legal action we could take, as well as ask for a judicial stay on that decision. In May of 2025, we saw a judicial stay in that decision, as well as EPA acknowledging that they're reconsidering that action they took in December of 2024. Sorry, this is a lot of dates and things, but ultimately where we're at is we're still a marginal non-attainment area for ozone. We're awaiting EPA's reconsideration of that decision. I think, indications are that we most likely will see them reconsider the denial of the extension and the reconsideration and the bump up. Our hope is we will get the second one-year extension, which gives us 3 years of good data to where we were meeting the standard, and then we can move forward and talk about redesignation and all the things that happen after that. So I think that's where we're at.
Okay, awesome. Mike, do you want to add anything about that or others?
Yeah, when it comes to the ozone designations, the tribe has been really diligent in fighting that fight to just have EPA really look at the facts. We have what could be considered poor air quality a few weeks out of the year. It's not anything that is really continuous, and it's always been our argument to EPA. The weather plays such a huge factor in this. We cannot control the weather, and so they really have to take that into considerations there. And it goes back to kind of what people have been talking about throughout the day too, is the public comment period on some of these things. I seen the docket for that reconsideration, and it was ridiculous. There was 10 to 12 public comments made. Out of those, maybe 3 or 4 were actually based in fact and had data-driven analysis behind it. And the others were, crazy comments. Like I remember one just said no, exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. And they take that into consideration and hold it in the same regard as a comment made by the Bingham Research Center. And to me, that's just, my jaw drops when you see that kind of thing. And so we're really, just trying to fight that, to get them to overturn that decision. And the last thing that we had heard on the tribal side of it is that they were still considering that one of the greatest tools that we have at our dispense is the government-to-government relationship we have with federal agencies. And so we can use that consultation process to really make our case and argue that. And so that's continually what we're doing. We make it a point whenever we go to our Washington, D.C. trips to always pay a visit to our friends there at EPA headquarters and really plead our case for not only the tribe, but for the basin as well.
Great, thanks a lot. So one thing, we have a couple kind of topics we wanted to cover as a panel. One is that we know the Uinta Basin has changed over time, particularly over maybe the last 5 or 10 years, and it's changed in a few ways. We've become more of an oil basin than a gas basin, although we heard maybe this morning that could switch back. Also, the places where most of the drilling is happening has moved. One other thing we are seeing is that our air pollution emissions have decreased over that time, and I'll show a couple of slides to kind of introduce that, and then we'll talk about why we think that might be happening. So this is some work that our team has done. I have a picture of a satellite that's used to make most of these measurements that we pulled this from. But so basically, we're using satellite data to look at total methane emissions from all of Uinta and Duchesne counties. And methane is actually not very important for ozone production. Non-methane organic compounds, often called volatile organic compounds, or VOC, and then nitrogen oxides, or NOx, that come out of burning and combustion, are what make ozone. But methane is a decent tracer for that in the Uinta Basin. And you can see that since 2013 to the last year we have a full year of data, 2024, we've seen some pretty big declines in emissions through the whole basin. And that is in spite of the fact that, especially since 2020, we've seen an increase in energy production. So the orange line on the graph is total energy. So we're taking oil and gas and putting them in equivalent energy units. And we've seen that going up, and maybe until 2023, a slight increase again in methane emissions, but then now a drop in 2024. I have one more factoid here. So one way to look at that is in 2013, when we first started this series of measurements, then about 5% of the fossil energy produced in the Uinta Basin was lost to the atmosphere as methane, and last year 1.5% was lost to the atmosphere as methane. So we're going in the right direction. We've made a lot of progress. So with that, we know we're making progress, but what we want to know is, why are we making progress? What have we done, and how is it working so that we can keep doing what's working in the future? And Jeanette, I wonder if you would talk to us about, from your industry perspective, how has the industry changed over that time? What has the industry been doing to bring emissions down in that way? And hopefully when you talk, we can all hear. We can see you. Go ahead.
Hi, Seth.
We hear you. We hear you.
Oh, great. I hear a little feedback, so I hope everybody can hear me okay.
We don't hear feedback on our end, so we apologize if it's on yours.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I just threw together some of the things that we as industry do, and for the sake of cracking a joke, we are commonly referred to as airheads, but we actually are trying to do a lot to reduce our emissions in the basin. So probably one of the biggest things that we do is we do reporting. So there is, even though that Quad O-B came out, we're still doing Quad O and Quad O-A reporting. Those are kind of spread out throughout the year. And then, of course, in March of every year, we do our greenhouse gas reporting. Then for the state, we do triennial reporting for all of our sources in the basin, and then just to UDAC, the annual sources greater than 25 tons. And then we do some other things that are related to Quad O-B well completion notifications that we submit either to EPA or to the state. On the stack testing side, we do Quad J initial and annual stack tests for anything greater than 500 horsepower. And now with the changes, we are submitting, even though it's might be to UDAC, but we're submitting to EPA through SEDRI. So one more step in what we have to do in reporting. And then on the monitoring side, just some loose statistics for FourPoint resources. Like last month, we did about 1,200 inspections that are Method 22, the LDAR, and the AVO inspections. So we have a whole team of LDAR, AVO, and Method 22 inspectors that go out and do all the monitoring, and we log those in Pronto forms, which is a form that's on their iPads or their computers. And then, of course, we have EPA and UDAC inspections. I think inspections are about to start up again, so their annual period is starting. We do lots and lots of record keeping for all the reporting that we do. And then if you're fortunate or unfortunate enough to have a consent decree, you're either negotiating one or complying, or you're closing it out if you're lucky enough to do that. And then we also have to submit permits, or request for permit. So on UDAC side, we have an NNOI, which is Notice of Intent, to get an approval order, and then we can also submit for a PBR. And then on the EPA side, for anything that is tribal, we would submit Part 1 and Part 2 forms and calculations to EPA and the tribe. And then, of course, just to make sure that we can do our permitting, we take samples, and then we do any kind of simulation modeling that would be like ProMax or HYSYS. And then for the BLM, we do general conformity calculations. And then, of course, we are required, and we need to do this on a regular basis. We're either training our operators, our LDAR teams, or even in some cases, like we're doing the latch the hatch training, hopefully again soon. And that's for trucking operations. And then last but not least, all the regulatory updates that happen in the air world. And that is constant. And that is the one thing we know that we will always work on.
So how different is that list from where you were in, say, 2013 or before?
I think it's just the level of record keeping. So, you know, for Quad OB, there's just way more record keeping as far as like flares go and testing, and it's just more comprehensive. The annual sources greater than 25 tons was more recent. It was a few years ago that started. And so I think that it's ramped up.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Mike or Sheila or Chris, what are your thoughts about changes that may have led or be leading to this decline in emissions that we're seeing?
I guess I'll go ahead real quick. And I'm a newbie compared to most people up here. I've only been working out here for 10 years with the state. But I've seen a real shift in the last 10 years, even from when I first came out here. I think the awareness is incredible. I think the work the industry has done voluntarily and paying attention to things like thief hatches and going above and beyond with LDAR, doing some of the flyovers they've done recently. So I think awareness has been, and I guess, you know, being made a non-attainment area will do that to you, but I also, I think a lot of personal satisfaction in doing a good job is what I see. We do have a compliance presence out here. Compliance is not a good word in this crowd probably for me to talk about, but I like to think, I think our inspectors spend a lot of time educating folks as well on what the rules are and when they change, and they do good work there. So yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I would say also this industry really drives technology. There are so many engineers who work in the oil and gas industry and are looking for ways to operate better and more cleanly. And that is driven to the things like better engine technology, better monitoring, better leak detection, operators using SCADA to get real-time updates on where there may be overpressurization in a tank, for example, and being able to respond to that quickly. I think it's really gone a long way. And as operators pick up those technologies voluntarily, they eventually work their way into rules, but it's made a difference.
And Mike, the first air quality monitors that saw high ozone were tribal monitors, and the tribe's been involved since the very beginning. And you've been involved in air quality since, I think, about the very beginning too. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I definitely see a change happening in the right direction. And I think part of that is the industry just kind of coming to the realization that, hey, we need to do something about our air issues that we have here. And part of that, too, is coming from the tribe, talking to our industry partners and having that relationship with them, with the operators, and letting them know that, you know, these are kind of our standards that we like to have as well. And I really want to commend and applaud the operators for taking on a lot of the voluntary reductions and the emission controls. What I used to see in the past, I've been doing environmental work for the tribe since about 2009, 2010. And what I really used to see then is industry didn't want to do anything until they were absolutely made to do it, through consent decrees, through different regulations, things like that. And that attitude has slowly started to change to where industry is now taking a lot of that burden on and implementing a lot of those changes. So it's definitely an attitude change, and it's helping.
Great. Do any of you see like a few or maybe one specific thing that has happened that might be having a big impact? Is it the big increase in LDAR inspections? Is it working on pneumatics or something like that? Are you aware, or do you have ideas about something that really is moving the needle or has moved the needle?
Yeah, I would say a lot of that is facility design, that people really put more work into estimating what the pressures will be from the separator through the tank through the control device. And so you reduce the possibility that you would have overpressurization and combine that with better constructed thief hatches and seals and the cleaning. I think that really goes a long way to prevent tank emissions.
Yeah, I think we've done some work, or did some work in the early days, seeing issues there and have seen big improvements. Who else has ideas about that? Do you, Jeanette, have a sense of that?
Yeah, I think that, I want to echo what Mike is saying, is that we're just trying to do better across the board. And I think one of the big pushes is tank design and it is facility design, but also replacing hatches that we just see chronic problems with, and just better technology. So I think all of that just all adds up.
It makes you think we maybe couldn't be here in 2013 with emissions this low because the technology and the engineering capacity just wasn't there. You think that's fair?
Yeah, I think it's all just helping.
Yeah, and I think, and you all in this crowd know better than myself, is the incredible growth we've seen is the fracking technology, the horizontal drilling, and those facilities we see, up to 18 wells at, but they're run in such a way, like Chris was talking about, with the SCADA and the systems in place and the VRUs and all the technology. You walk on those facilities and they're just amazing, and they're clean and they're controlled. So I think you see all this growth, but it's all being done in a way that's protective of the airshed here. And I think a lot of work has still been done on what we would call the marginal well sites, the older sites. I think folks have been paying attention to those, and again, doing the LDAR work and understanding those better. We have a unique issue here in the basin also, where we have a lot of two-stroke engines running pump jacks on some of these older wells, and we know through some studies that there are some good emissions of VOCs coming from those that we're trying to understand better and look for solutions. And I know electrification is a big issue, but hopefully we can all work together and focus on some of those sources here in the future.
If I could add one more thing, I think the regulatory environment makes a difference too, right? It is harder to operate in an ozone non-attainment area. It just forces you to put more planning into how your sites are developed. And I'm based in Denver. We're a severe non-attainment area, so it's even worse there. But when you look at the basin, there's a lot of uncertainty over what you need to do in order to get a permit. And what Sheila was saying earlier about the classification, whether it's marginal, moderate, or up to serious, can make a real difference. The classification could change very quickly. And so I think that makes it harder for your planning. Currently marginal because the court intervened and stayed the EPA's decision, but that could change on a dime if the reconsideration is denied and the denial or the denial of the extension goes through and the court lifts the stay. the basin could switch to being a serious non-attainment area with a much lower threshold for major source permitting status, really on a dime. It would have happened already if the court had not intervened. And so I think that just forces you to operate better because you have to plan better to have the license to operate.
Okay, before we move on to a little bit different topic, then we see an improvement. We know we can still make winter ozone in the Uinta Basin. We saw that as recently as winter 2023, but for a given set of weather conditions, it's harder to make, or we make less than we used to because our emissions have improved. But I have one more question, and it's a harder one and maybe less positive. Is the low-hanging fruit gone, or do you expect that trend will continue? What do you all think about that? We could see a plateauing, or whatever the opposite of a plateau is, where emissions don't improve anymore because we've done all this work that's relatively easy, or maybe there's a lot more to go and we're gonna run these emissions right close to zero.
I think there's more that can be done, especially for new and modified facilities when you have the capital to make the investment. So if you are replacing older horizontal wells with, or excuse me, older vertical wells with horizontal, and you're putting money into the site, there are things you can do, whether it's electrification, changing the engines, but for retrofits of just an existing facility, it is definitely hard to do. And I think another piece of it is not just reducing emissions, but the question is how much of a difference will it make in ozone? Because as you mentioned with the sunlight and getting inversions of very stable atmosphere with no wind, it is very ripe for generating ozone kind of no matter what the emissions are, and that can make it hard to attain.
Yeah, do you have thoughts about that, Mike, from the tribe's perspective?
So I think as the technology gets better, emission controls are going to obviously get a lot better. And just to kind of echo what was already said is a lot of these reductions are coming from new production and new facilities because it's easier and it's more cost effective to build those controls into the facility as it's being constructed rather than doing all of these retrofits. So I think that's where our next big problem that is gonna happen is with all of these older locations and all of the leaks that are happening on those. One of the things I know the tribe is actively doing now is we're looking at building our own solar microgrids out in the field so that we can begin to start to electrify the field and get rid of some of these engines.
Yeah, great. And that, particularly the issue of marginal wells, is something we've been talking about just the last couple of days with stakeholders. We know that it's harder to retrofit, it's harder to do emissions reducing upgrades. I don't think we have a clear or quantitative understanding of how important are low producing wells in the air quality problem compared to new production that's come online in the last 5 years. And that's something like that the pressure's on us to understand that from the research perspective. So we know, do we need to put a lot of resources there or figure out how to do that? Or is focusing on new production good enough to get us where we need to be? That's maybe a new research frontier for us.
And it would be really nice to know if it's NOx or VOCs to worry about. So if you can answer that question.
I'll let Sheila go first, then I may have something to blab about that.
Chris just stole my thunder. That's kind of something we at the state would like to understand better. And I think, our hope is if we do not go down the path of a serious non-attainment area, I think, a state implementation plan, there's a lot of prescriptive rules and requirements that come with a SIP that maybe don't fit the basin. So our hope is we get a little more time, I think, as some operators talked about up here recently, is we get a little more time to really understand. We want to make sure if we do new regulation that it's impactful and it makes sense and it really will, turn the knob down on the ozone formation. And that is one of the questions, because we see, we studied and did some testing on these two-stroke engines. We saw there was a lot more reactive VOCs than we were putting in our emissions inventory. However, you get rid of these two-stroke engines and maybe you put a bigger engine in. Well, now you have NOx, and is that going to make the problem worse, or is it the reactive VOCs? And similar with the growth here, with a lot of those mega well sites, like we're seeing a lot of the air compressors that are doing great work. But now we're maybe running some more engines again in the basin, and we're creating NOx. And So yeah, a lot of the science is still what we want to make sure we understand. So we could do real effective regulating and not just be prescribed by what the Clean Air Act, and if we become a serious area, you gotta, look at auto body shops or something. So, we want to make sure we focus on the problem, the real problem.
Yeah, I think I was talking with some folks before about our team and others have been researching this issue since around 2012. 2011 was really the beginning of the research project that USU did. But it feels like with the change in emissions, the change in how wells are constructed and operated, we have a lot of information that's not as relevant as it used to be, because we know what wells did 10, 15, and even 5 years ago, but we know less about what they're doing today. And as data centers that are natural gas powered come in the basin, and as you talk about bringing a lot more NOx, we've historically been a very low NOx emitting basin, and that it's trickier than you think, because as the season changes, then the whole ozone chemistry changes. I won't talk more about chemistry because we want you to stay. But there, as these changes happen, we kind of have to relearn things that we thought we knew before. Okay, so that we stay on time, let's move ahead, and we wanted to talk also about the changing federal landscape. There's regulatory changes proposed or rolling forward. There's softer changes in emphases that are coming from the federal government too. And Chris, you were going to give us a little bit of a rundown, and then we can discuss that some.
Yes.
And do you want me, if we can put the slides back up, then I think Chris has a couple of slides about that. So we'll start here, right?
And I don't know if the legal talk will scare people away more than the chemistry. It's an open question.
We've got an exciting group up here, don't we?
But sure. So you're all familiar that Quad OB and Quad OC have been published. They were published in March of 2024. And just as a quick recap, so Quad OB imposes both VOC and methane limits on new and modified facilities that were new and modified after December of 2022. Those rules took effect. They have been in effect for a year and a half. Quad OC is the rule that sets emission guidelines, and states or tribes can have to adopt a plan to achieve the same amount of emission reductions that would be achieved from the emission guidelines. They have some flexibility over exactly what they regulate and how. They just need to show that the state plan they are adopting, or tribal plan, will get the same emission reductions as the EPA's model rules. So EPA published its model rules. They're in the Code of Federal Regulations, but they're not enforceable on their own. But that's March 2024, the final rule. Every major rule that EPA publishes gets challenged in court. People petition for litigation or petition for reconsideration. No exception here. So parties did ask EPA to reconsider, and EPA has said yes on, so far, 2 very narrow issues. So in January of this year, they published proposed revisions to a couple of technical issues. One was the amount of time that you could flare associated gas at a well pad changed from 24 hours to 48 hours in certain events where you had upset conditions or malfunctions. So that was the easy change. The second one that they have proposed and granted reconsideration on is about the net heating value for the gas streams that go to a flare or an enclosed combustion device. And so the original rule from 24 has minimum net heating value standards, and this is intended to make sure that there's enough energy content in the gas that's being flared that it will actually burn. And so you had to monitor or sample to determine that you were meeting that. That was industry objected to that because it's expensive and cumbersome, and really at these well pads there's no question that the gas going to the combustor has enough heat content to burn. So they have proposed to reconsider the net heating value standards. That was January of this year. In July of this year, EPA published the interim final rule that extended a number of deadlines. So several components of Quad OB have been given about another 10 months to comply. They pushed most of these dates out until January of 2027. They also extended the deadline for states and tribes to submit a plan with their own regulations for existing sources. And so that was going to be May of 2026, and now it's January of 2027. So about another 10 months on that plan as well. I don't know if you want to hear, or if we have time to go through some of the more weedy details of what
We're
they
probably running a
flagged.
little short.
Yeah,
We don't want to go over at the end of the day, or we'll get
So-
mutiny.
So I will just say that EPA has put in their unified agenda, which they just published 2 weeks ago. They have said that they intend to reconsider more aspects of this rule. I think it would cover things like the pneumatic controller standards, the ECD performance testing requirements, several others. They have announced an intent to have another round of reconsideration. They would propose those rules in November and finalize them sometime next year, maybe July.
So we want to save a little time for questions, but Mike and Sheila and then Jeanette, could you talk to us just a little about how these changes, or maybe the uncertainty or whatever, is impacting things as you see it? How the federal changes are. Is that okay? Or if you can say Pat.
Well, I'm fine. I'm just looking at Mike. You want to go first, or you want me to go?
Yeah, if you would, Mike, go first.
Okay, so I think one of the big issues with a lot of these federal rules is it really comes down to just the jurisdictional issues that are here in the basin as well. So EPA is still the regulating authority in Indian country, and sometimes the federal rules don't always match up timeline-wise with the rules that the state puts down. And that's always been just one of those big issues that we have. And it's like, we understand that there has to be regulations, and so we ask EPA, give us some of those authorities, delegate some of that back over to the tribe, because we do have a pretty robust air quality program. We have professionals there that can actually do a lot of this work. And it seems like we're always getting roadblocked by EPA to do some of that. And again, it just comes down to exercising our sovereignty and our own self-determination. And EPA likes to talk that good game where they say, yes, we can help you, but then when it actually comes down to it, it's a lot harder than it seems. So that's the big challenge that I see with these rules, just that the conflicting timelines and even just some of the requirements that's going to be in there from the federal side versus the state side.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Sheila, go ahead.
Yeah, so I will say in my years of working here, the one thing that talking with industry and other interested parties is the one thing they want is certainty, right? Like, tell me what the rules are and we'll follow them. And unfortunately, I think, what is that saying? The one thing we're certain of is that our death and taxes things. Yeah. So unfortunately, certainty is something we don't have, and even now we're seeing these changes happening, and we at the state are kind of just patiently watching. And our hope is we get some clarity here in the next year. So we've just taken a pause in terms of any planning towards our Quad C state plan. We have drafts, we have things we were working on, but we see now, we know that EPA is going to do some reconsideration and things are going to change. So, our focus right now is the one thing, I'm proud of that we worked on early on was our permit by rule program we did for oil and gas wells. I know when it was first proposed and I was working through it, there was some hesitancy, but I believe it has helped both us at the state be more efficient, and it helps with compliance to be more efficient. And so we're looking for efficiencies. So we are looking at maybe a permit by rule expansion to compressor stations with our program. So we're just working on some things internally to help us work a little better and more efficient. And we are just waiting.
Great.
I think there are a couple things operators can do to try to manage the uncertainty, and I agree it's real. But one step is that the basin is marginal now, so try to get permits approved and get construction commenced while it's still marginal. I mean, that's the most obvious strategy to deal with the uncertainty. Another one is just to develop plans that you could flex if you needed to. So we have so many of these rules that were adopted previously under the Biden administration. Now they're going to be reconsidered, and it's not just the ozone, it's the whole suite of requirements. So makes it more challenging, but plan for ways that you could comply with that rule if you have to, and then maybe if you don't need to, then you can cut back your expenses a little bit. But some of that flexible planning, I think, could help. I would also suggest looking at existing facilities that are over 50 tons per year and might have to get a Title V permit if the basin did go serious. Look for ways that you could get them below 50 tons per year and avoid the need to get that permit, or maybe also look for ways you could get emission reductions and bank credits for that, especially on state land where there is a program, and hopefully we'll get a federal banking rule too.
One day perhaps. Great, thanks a lot, Chris. Jeanette, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that for especially that like the net heating value that Chris was talking about, you know, to comply with the rule, it's expensive if you want to install a calorimeter or something like that, and it's really not controlling emissions. And so, because we already know that anything off the tanks is going to have a very high BTU, and it's really a non-issue. And so it's a matter of putting your money into something that is really going to be effective for industry. So if it means installing flares or better gaskets or something like that, whereas spending money on something that isn't going to yield any reduction in emissions is what I think hurts the industry and hurts moving the needle to the point of seeing that curve decline on the emissions in the basin.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So I just want to add on one of those things too. I think one of the things that really need to happen with these federal rules is that they need to be tailored to our area. One of the things that I've really noticed working around EPA all these years is that they like to put out these kind of blanket rules, and they really don't address the issues that you actually have here. And so I know that's one of the things that we're constantly pushing them on, is you need to begin to, first of all, listen to the folks who live here, because we know what the problems are. We have a good idea. And it's just all about that, customizing and tailoring these rules to what is the actual real problems are.
Yeah, great thought. Thank you. If anybody on the panel has something else you're dying to say, now's the time, and then maybe we'll do some questions. Okay, I guess we're ready for questions. And Travis says there's a microphone over here. Maybe it's this one by the stairs. We'd love to hear what you want to know. Or you can probably raise your hand and shout, and I'll try to repeat it.
I'll just be nice and loud.
Okay.
Sheila, this one might be for you. So they're still evaluating or reviewing, you said, about what's the confounding factor for ozone in the basin, VOC or NOx. Why does Region 8 feel like we're NOx limited? That's the confounding factor. What data does Region 8 have that hasn't been provided to you guys?
And I'll try to repeat that, and you can tell me, you can give me a thumbs down if I paraphrase wrong. But I think you're saying, you mentioned the concern is it NOx or VOC limited? Which pollutant is most important to reduce? The gentleman here says EPA seems to be pushing as if we're NOx limited, and what evidence is that based on?
I guess I'm not sure that EPA has actually come out and said anything that straightforward.
I disagree with that because they told it to me on the phone. That's why we bought.
Oh, okay. So EPA Region 8 has said that we are a NOx limited ozone non-attainment area to you.
That's why we bought. Correct.
Well, I guess all I would say to that is when we're looking at rules as an ozone non-attainment area, we are looking to reduce both NOx and VOCs. That is our focus because we know those are the two precursors. And like I said, I guess we have never really we've worked with Seth for years. We believe because we see so much of the VOCs, and we've started to, in our emissions inventory, we have found places where we used to have this idea that we were missing all these VOCs in our inventory. And over the years, we've slowly but surely identified more VOCs from ponds than was previously in our inventory. Like I mentioned, the engines, we've seen a little bit more from tanks. So we feel like we've identified these VOC emissions. So we realize one of the issues with modeling ozone here in the basin that we haven't done successfully is that we've never had enough, and Seth can correct me because I'm not a modeler, but it was the VOCs that we were struggling with trying to recreate ozone in the model, right?
Yeah.
So that, I guess, intuitively you'd say, we have found those VOCs, but we do need the NOx to make the ozone. So.
And if I can chime in just a little and to make sure that everyone's on the same page, because VOC limited, NOx limited is probably not a term everybody knows, but so imagine that you're making an ozone cake and you need flour and eggs, and if you have way more flour than you need, you still can only make as many cakes as you have eggs for, or the opposite, right? And the VOC comes in our basin mostly from kind of working and operations of the oil and gas industry. Natural gas is VOC. And NOx comes from combustion and burning. And so it's about which one of these do you have too much of, so then you can focus on reducing the other one and make fewer cakes more easily or more efficiently. What I'll say is that what our understanding is that it's, as Sheila said, that reductions in NOx and VOC are both effective. And it kind of depends seasonally. We don't need to get into that. But it's not NOx limited in the sense that VOC reductions wouldn't have value in this basin. So all emissions reductions that we can achieve would be very useful. I think, let's see our time. I'm sure we have time for at least another question. The mic's in a less scary place over there. Somebody's got to have a burning question. I guess not. Getting crickets. So we appreciate you all listening to us, and hooray for the Uinta Basin. We've been moving in the right direction, right?
Yeah, thank you everyone for your time and attention, and appreciate all that you do.
Thank you.